Peer Through Time, Part 5. This time I want to talk about something a blue deck does, but we're talking about a homonym. Obviously, blue decks are known for their counters, but because we're using a Planeswalker as our commander, I want to take note of the 5 loyalty counters he starts off with. See, counters are important when you're playing blue, but more so when you're playing this type of deck because you can actually try a different strategy called Proliferate. Now, Proliferate works from, it came out of Scars of Mirrodin block. And it changed how people played their decks. Because most people played it with Infect, and that's fine, but most blue cards aren't really using Infect the same way. In fact, a lot of the artifacts are what really make Proliferate work. Artifacts like Contagion Clasp, that's a foil one, but you don't necessarily need a foil one. Contagion Engine. And the nice thing about Contagion Engine, in addition to doing Proliferate twice on activation, you can actually use the -1/-1 counters to get rid of things like True Name Nemesis. But let's talk about the blue cards that actually work very well with Proliferate. And unfortunately, one of them is an Infect creature, and that's Viral Drake. 4 mana for 1/4 flying, and Infect, that's not the point I'm trying to make though. Its ability is 3/1 blue, Proliferate. 4 mana to Proliferate. And that's incredible. You can use the -1 ability on Teferi to untap 4 lands, then use those 4 lands to activate the ability of Proliferate, put another counter on Teferi, put another -1/-1 counter, or a bunch of -1/-1 counters. Or if you're going to be that kind of player, hit them once with Infect, and then just kill them with the Proliferate ability. That's fine. That's a strategy. But blue has other abilities that work with Proliferate. Inexorable Tide. So whenever you cast any kind of a spell, you proliferate. It's an automatic thing, even if the spell is countered. So what kind of spells do you want to look at? The kind of spells that started it all off. Clock Spinning is from Time Spiral. Has a buyback of 3, and buyback was one of those abilities that was so powerful they created Storm because they thought Storm would be less powerful than buyback. Let that sink in. Buyback was such a powerful ability they said, we can't do this again. They tried Strive in Theros. They tried Replicate for Izzet, and it just never quite clicked as well as Buyback does. And there's actually a really good reason for that. Buyback, when you cast a spell, upon resolution, it goes right back to your hand. If it's countered, it goes to the graveyard, but on resolution, you just keep getting it back. And this specific card was the origin of Proliferate. Choose a counter on target permanent or suspended card, remove that counter from that permanent, or put another of those counters on it. For 1 blue mana and 3, you could put another counter on Teferi, or another counter on something you put -1/-1 counters, or you can just keep pumping up all of your every counter you've got. That's what makes Proliferate so powerful. And the other nice thing is you can actually use it to kill off an opponent's Planeswalker by removing those counters. Proliferate is an amazing ability. Now, if you're going to use Proliferate, you need more cards besides Teferi that use counters. Things like Sphinxbone Wand. This is a no-brainer. With Buyback, this card just works. It was made for Buyback, except it wasn't because Buyback's too powerful. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may put a charge counter on it. If you do, it deals damage equal to the number of charge counters on it to target creature or player. In this type of deck, with Clock Spinning, you can actually start putting more counters onto it, and every other time you cast this, you're dealing more damage. You can take out any type of permanent, as long as it's not hexproof. And it's just fantastic. It can actually win you the game if you play it right. In addition to the Sphinxbone Wand, we have another artifact, Otherworld Atlas. You can tap to put a charge counter on it, or you can tap and each player can draw a card for each charge counter on Otherworld Atlas. Now, this is the kind of card that you play it, and this, along with Well of Ideas, makes you the popular player. Always activate it on the player just before their turn ends, the player just before you. At the end of their turn, have everybody draw their cards so they don't necessarily have to discard, except for that one guy who was right before you. Sucks to be him, but you always get fresh cards on your turn. And because it's a charge counter based, you can just keep tapping and putting more counters on it, use it with Teferi to untap it, and you just keep drawing more cards. If you wanted to, you could even get out Teferi's emblem, and at everybody's turn, have everyone start drawing more cards. With Proliferate then, this becomes another win condition because you could potentially make other players draw themselves to death. Or you could make yourself draw yourself to death. So think about that too. And then there was a card already in the deck that worked very well. That was Everflowing Chalice. 0 to get out, multi-kicker of 2. Enters play with a charge counter. For every charge counter, you can tap it and add 1 mana of that charge, and 1 mana for each of those charge counters. Put it out for the 2 and just start proliferating it up. Use Viral Drake and Clock Spinning and Contagion Class, Contagion Engine. Just keep pumping more and more charge counters into it and getting more and more colorless mana out of it. That's a really decent strategy. And if that's one artifact that does it, another one that has yet to be played as much is Astral Cornucopia. It costs 3 times X to put it out, so you could pay 6 mana to put 2 counters on it, and then tap for 2 mana of any color. 9 mana and it taps for 3 mana of any color. Put it out for 3 though, taps for 1 mana of any color. You'll always name blue because that's your commander. But you can proliferate it up and up and up and up, and use Teferi to untap it and the Everflowing Chalice, and just keep getting more and more mana, which you then use to proliferate more and more and cast more of your buyback spells. It all works so very, very well. And then I took out one of the larger creatures to get out a creature that had... Well, this actually works with other cards that I haven't shown you yet, but it's an 0/3 Defender for 1/1 blue. For every 1/1 blue, you can put a Hatchling counter on it. And then when you pay 1/1 blue and you put a Hatchling counter on it, if there are 5 or more, you remove all of them and transform it. So at most, you'll pay 6 mana. 1/1 blue, 1/1 blue, and then 1/1 blue for the last one to transform. And that's because of Proliferate, you can put all 5 counters or more onto it before you transform it. When you do, it becomes a 13/13 trample. The other really cool thing is you can do this during combat. You can do this after it blocks. You can do this while it's attacking. Well, it has Defender, but you can do this. You can just do a lot of things with it. It's just a really, really cool effect. Rare, but not terribly expensive. And since we're talking about what kind of cards we use with counters, I might as well also talk about other buyback spells that you can play. Specifically, Spellburst was one of the buyback counter spells. The other one, Forbid, is a little too pricey. It's 2 blue and 1, and then you discard 2 cards to buy it back. This is 1 blue and X, and the counter target spell with converted mana cost of X. The buyback is 3. It can take out a 0 casting cost spell for only 4 mana, 1 blue and 3 buyback. 1 casting cost Bonfire of the Damned for 1/1 blue and 5 mana to counter it, and you get the Spellburst back. Works wonderful with Inexorable Tide, works with Sphinx Bone Wand. It's a good card in general, and it works very well in this strategy. Likewise, you could play Capsize to return permanents to your hand. You can use this to... I would suggest using this mostly to save your creatures and permanents, or to save other people's creatures and permanents to help them out, because you want allies in multiplayer. This card was so powerful, it became a deck type, because as soon as you got 3 mana, you could do this every turn on their lands, and your opponent would never gain any traction against you. Don't do that, though, unless you're about to win the game, and there's one player that everybody agrees, yeah, we got to slow that guy down. And even then, it's kind of a jerk thing to do, so use it sparingly. And I gotta point this out. This was a common card. And it's 3 mana, return target permanent is more than Boomerang to do. The buyback is 3, but in Commander, you're going to get out 6 mana. Not to mention, Teferi can give you the 4 mana right then and there with his roll down ability. Very powerful card. Works extremely well with Inexorable Tide. Works extremely well with Sphinx Bone Wand. Good strategy, and there's more cards that work in it. If you can't pull it back up, you might get Mind Games and tap down an artifact, creature, or land. That's the next best thing to pulling something back up to someone's hand. You could pay 1 blue, then the 2/1 blue buyback. Or, that's 4 mana. Tap a target artifact, creature, or land. It doesn't stop most artifacts. You have to then use it during the upkeep to kind of slap. You can actually tap down things like Howling Mine. I don't know if that is eroded to where it has to be untapped anymore, but that's where it would kind of help. If it's something that has to be activated as a sorcery, this would help take care of it during their upkeep. For 4 mana, not bad. You still have the Inexorable Tide, you still have Sphinx Bone Wand, and it keeps coming back up to your hand. So that's useful. Then Mystic Speculation. Sensei's Divining Top, it ain't. It's 1 blue mana, sorcery, buyback of 2. but the ability is to scry 3. This is the kind of card, I don't know why this isn't played in Modern, because, or maybe it is and I just haven't seen anybody play it. 1 blue mana for scry 3, that's really great, but then the 2 buyback, that means for every 3 mana you spend, you get to look at the top 3 and decide what you do or don't want to draw coming up. With cards like Well of Ideas or Clockwork Atlas, you can immediately put the card right into your hand. That's incredible. And I get it. It's 3 mana versus Sensei's Dividing Top of 1 mana to activate. But it's repeatable. You can do it more than once in a turn. If you get out that 6 mana, that's 6 cards you get to scry through, or 5 or 4. You know, it's worth it. But then, if you want to start drawing cards, you don't have a Staff of Domination, well, Whispers of the Muse is a fantastic card. Sorry. Come on. Focus. There we go. 1 blue mana, draw a card. That's it. 1 blue mana, draw a card. Buyback of 5. At the end of the turn before you start, cast this during their end step. If you didn't have to counter something or didn't have to leave all the mana open, use this to draw a card. I've given these to people to play, and I've seen them pay the 1 blue mana on their first turn just to draw a card. And if it were multiple copies of it in a deck, I get it, but you kind of want to hold off on this, or you don't want to have it in your opening hand. You want to mulligan it away to get a different card, because you really want this when you draw, you really want this when you get the mana for it. And of course, in this strategy, it works with the Tide, it works with the Sphinx Bone Wand. It's just a good card in general.